Yeah, you know, but we're going to have to see whether or not the data is going to beat the stats here, because this man down here in the bottom left-hand side of the map has only won 3 of the last 37 maps against his opponent. He is Ryung.
And his opponent, playing with the blue Zerg drones in the opposite corner, it's Solar. So I just had a quick little look, and apparently the last time that these two played was about 2.5 weeks ago, a best of 5 series, and Solar ended up winning 3-0.
Yeah, that's the scary thing, is that it's not just that in the last series they've been like 16-0 in Solar's favor. It's actually just the fact that during all of those series, Solar's only actually taken, or sorry, Ryung has only ever taken 3 maps. That is the truly scary thing, is that it's not just Solar wins out, but they have some close series, because that does sometimes happen. It is Solar seems to dominate versus Ryung, and I do think a lot of that history also, because this goes all the way back to 2017 across all 16 of those series, and further back if you start counting actually all of the wins that I've actually clipped out of that stat for Ryung actually winning way back in the past. But I mean, it does not factor in that Ryung is playing a bit better than he was, like I'd say a few years ago. I think that Ryung did have a bit of a dip further down, and he's kind of risen a little bit back up. I think
looking really good.
Yeah, he's been looking a lot better than he was, like I say, a few years ago. I still think Solar comes into this pretty heavily favored, but I think Ryung is not fully represented by those statistics we're talking about.
Yeah, Solar, of course, he's been doing really well for a long time. Just consistently kind of that guy who's always really strong, but not necessarily the winner of the tournament.
Group stage Solar, man.
Yeah, pretty much for, well, the better part of a decade, it seems, right?
Yeah.
But obviously, well, the Rogue going to the military, I think it's fair to say that Solar, or maybe Ragnarok is the number 2 Zerg in Korea right now, and yeah, he's definitely not going to be an easy opponent right here for Ryung whatsoever.
No, definitely not. And I think Solar also had a pretty strong performance recently in the deeper end of TSL 9, and he's doing a great job. Okay,
good start.
This is a nice little...
Oh, never mind.
almost blocked off that drone from becoming a third. Would have been an annoying delay there for Solar. And again, it's the little things that can definitely add a bit of a mental edge here, as you know you're going up against an opponent who typically beats you.
Yeah, it's one of those small things, right? The mental victories can really mean a lot, and throwing the Zerg off of their 3rd hatchery timing and just, yeah, ever so slightly eking out an advantage early on is nice with that Reaper. So far, not really achieving them too much, but should be able to keep this, this Reaper alive to scout in just a moment.
Yeah. Curious what we're going to be seeing Ryung actually busting on out. Ryung has been one of those players that has just such a storied history in StarCraft, and he's been able to actually throw out a lot of really nice, aggressive openings and stuff, set a bit of the pace of the game. But he's going to be going for a 3CC opener this game, so nothing hyper aggressive, and I'm really just curious what we're going to be seeing coming out of the Starport eventually.
Yeah, I feel like Ryung's playstyle is always very similar to Maru's, right? So they talk a lot about strategy, and I kind of expect him to play similar to Maru. Now, one thing Maru has been doing quite a bit lately is once again opening up with a Liberator rather than a Banshee. So we'll see what's coming out of that starport here as it finishes up. We'll be going for the switcheroo. That's going to be a Viking first, okay?
Yeah, going for a few Overlord pickoffs here and there. Never a bad thing to go for. But yeah, I really am actually quite excited about seeing how Solar is going to perform. Because again, I know we've been hyping up Solar a lot with all the stats and everything, but this is also just something I want to highlight. Solar is absolutely killer in this stage of tournaments. This is actually the strongest form of Solar. It's almost like Solar does get weaker in the later stages, and part of it is just because he looks weaker because he's going up against the best players in the world. It's like, okay, did he really get weaker, or is he literally just playing the best players?
Turns out beating guys like Serral and Clem and whatnot is tricky.
Yeah, it turns out it actually ends up being a little bit tougher, but I still think Solar in the group stages, this is where he is like unfathomable.
So I was excited right there because we actually have Hyperflight Rotors coming up. That is an upgrade that we see maybe 1 in 100 games or so. So that is the Banshee speed improvement. He's getting this before Cloak. Now, if Solar is going to scout with an Overlord, I think he's probably not going to do so anymore at this point after the Vikings shut it out of the sky. Normally you go for Cloak first though, and I think he probably would have put his opponent on Banshees regardless. There's a Roach Horn coming up, so Solar is figuring out that something may just not be entirely correct. As indeed, we do have double Starport Banshee.
Yeah, this is going to actually hit in a very interesting way, because I have to imagine this is not going to be easy for Solar to scout, because even if Solar moves in and sees one of the starports that Tech Lab researching, you're gonna, like you said, you're gonna assume it was Cloak. So unless you see the second starport, I feel like it's gonna be very difficult to identify.
Yeah, so normally at most you would maybe expect, you know, you've seen a Viking right now in Zerg, right? So what do you expect as a follow-up right now? You'd expect it to see a Banshee already. If not, you're probably putting your opponent on maybe a late Liberator or even a Battlecruiser. Do you really expect there to suddenly be like, I'm assuming he's gonna have at least 4? Do you really assume 4 cloaked speed Banshees to appear at like 6 minutes?
There is a Spire being dropped down right now. Yeah, and if the Roaches can zone out the Hellions and make sure that they are just not a concern, the Queens can really focus in on dealing with any of the Banshees. We also have an Overseer already morphing in. You can kind of see further out on the map. I do wonder if that's going to be able to just stick around back at home, because the Cloak is going to be finishing up in a moment's time.
Yeah. I actually think that Solar at this point is putting his opponent on Battlecruisers. So Roach, Ravager, Corruptor is really strong against Battlecruiser play, and I think it's going to be really good against what Ryung is doing as well. He's, by the way, transitioning on the back of this towards Terran Megadon. So additional factories coming up.
Overseer taking some damage. It is probably going to be able to scout out at least one of the starports.
No, he sees the factory as a transition, though, so that's good.
Yeah, that is definitely important, being able to see the big transition there. But I'm really curious, because now the Spire timing is going to be finishing up. And I don't think we've really seen the Banshees do a whole lot just yet.
Have they been spotted? So there's 2 more coming up. We're going up to 7 Banshees right now. Well, now they're spotted for sure. They actually take care of those Queens very rapidly if they can get on top of them. There's the cloaking, and well, now Solar knows.
This is the big moment here, and as the Spire finishes up, we can immediately see a bunch of mutas get started on up. But how much damage can these Banshees do? One Banshee already gets knocked out of the sky at the same time as his Ling counterattack on the other side of the map is killing quite a few workers. Oh no, this is not how Ryung wanted this to go.
Yeah, he basically tried to surprise his opponent, and the surprise, well, it didn't work. As a matter of fact, he's losing tons of SCVs at home in the meantime. And has he really done anything other than kill a couple Queens?
No, yeah, he killed 2 drones. He didn't even manage to deny like a 4th base or anything. And now with the mutas coming out, what are the Banshees going to be able to do? There is one nice advantage of Hyperflight Rotors. You can outrun over. You can run away. You can disengage. So you can try and do little bits of damage like this. And even though the mutas could theoretically catch him, yeah, it's not going to be enough though. Solar takes game number 1. Honestly, just a bit of a smackdown for that.
Yeah, so strategically, that was a very cool play, and definitely something that I like quite a bit. But I'm fairly sure that at this point, Solar was assuming his opponent was going to play Battlecruisers, right? And what do you do against Battlecruisers? You go for a Spire.
Yeah.
And you kind of rely with those Banshee openers, I believe, to just not have your opponent have a Spire at all. So it's cool, but a bit shaky.
It was almost such an anti-timing, too, where the Banshees revealing themselves 4 or 5 seconds before the Spire actually finished up as well. So he's just like, Spire finished up, he's like, oh, yeah, well, I mean, I guess I know what I have to do. I'll just dump all my gas into these mutas, because the muta's going to do a better job of catching things than, say, Corruptors. And you can also see, like, the mutas are able to counterattack and also continue to do additional damage as opposed to Corruptors, which they would have had a harder time doing something. So everything just lined up really, really well. Both, I would say, kind of like timing-wise there for Solar, but also just he didn't really take a lot of damage to the surprise of the Banshees in the first place.
Yeah. You make up a very good point, though. Like, what if he would not have had a Spire there? He still had, like, 11 Queens, it seems? Like, there were still, like, a dozen Queens available.
I do want to also credit, again, Solar got the Ling counterattack damage done. So even as the Banshees, we were saying, how much damage did they really do? They killed off a couple of Queens, they killed off 2 drones, damaged the 4th base hatchery. The Ling counterattack did like 10 to 15 workers worth of damage. They did more damage, I think, those 8 or 10 Lings than all 6 of the Banshees with Hyperflight Rotors.
Turns out Queens are pretty good units for, you know, just not taking early game damage.
You would know, buddy.
All right. Yeah. Anyways, cheeky little opener right there from Ryung in game number 1. I don't expect we're going to be seeing something like that again in game number 2, because we can really tell that Solar just knew what to do, right? Didn't hesitate for a moment.
I would be very interested in seeing whether or not Ryung does want to open up with mech again as the transition. If he wants to add on additional factories or something, and if that was like a interesting way for him to get to a style of gameplay he thought would be effective versus Solar, or if that was a throwaway build and he's just going to revert back to more typical bio kind of play.
Alrighty. Game number 2 of this best of 3 series takes place on the map Inside and Out. Now, spotting here in the top right-hand corner, we have the man who loves Banshees, and his name is Ryung.
And down here in the bottom left-hand side of the map, the blue Zerg player representing onside game, he is Solar. A good old 1-0 lead in these best of threes. He is one game away from locking down a good old W here, and that's going to be pretty important for moving on to the next group stage.
Yes, for sure. So this is obviously one of the earlier stages of the tournament, but winning earlier is better than losing earlier, right? So Solar definitely looking to get
critical
that
analysis there, Simon.
Happy to help out, man. If you guys have any questions, just ask Cats on Twitter. Don't ask me. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. I really did enjoy Cat's explanation of the tournament formats. That was so good.
Yeah, it was excellent. I'm sure everybody knows exactly what to expect from the remainder of this tournament right now. Basically what you need to know, okay, if you didn't quite understood all the details that Cats was mentioning, there's a lot of epic StarCraft 2 coming for you for the next couple of days. So just make sure whatever you had planned for this weekend, just, stop doing it. Just start watching the A, B, C, D streams or everything that's happening here.
Exactly, because we have a lot of StarCraft, and apparently a lot of these games are going to take a while. So, but not so much that last one, and that does bring us back to this series, where again, I'm really wondering, Loco, how would you feel about? Do you want to see Ryung bust out something a little bit strange again, or do you want to just see him try to play out like more of a standard macro style game and do something that's a little bit more in line with the norm?
Yeah, I think that's really tricky. So that building game number 1 from Ryung kind of tells me that he doesn't feel too comfortable going up against Solar in a straightforward macro game. Because Ryung does play a lot of macro, and he clearly decided to go for a bit of a cheeky opener there instead, trying to get a quick and easy win, and Solar just shut it down hard. So at this point, I mean, you could go for another all-in, but there's a very good chance that Solar is once again going to hold that relatively easily. Yeah, I feel like you probably want to play more straight up at this point, but I also feel that Solar's favored in that department.
Yeah, this is, I think, the really tough thing, is that Solar, he is such a strong player. I mean, these days especially, I think he has been killing it. He's been turning his group stage killer Solar vibe into something that even hits around like round of 8 and stuff, and he can make some of those deeper runs in some of these premier events. Again, TSL, I think, is a really great example of something like that. So it's hard. What do you decide to do? And I think that Ryung has a lot of different types of strategies and builds and stuff under his belt, but do you just bring it back to the solid kind of macro play? We'll have to wait and see what his decision is here, as he is going to throw down that starport, get up that third CC, and I think decision will be revealed in probably about another minute or so.
Yeah, we're going to see what he decides to go for here in just a moment. I wouldn't be surprised if this is going to be a more normal macro-focused game.
I wouldn't hate it. Yeah.
All right, so Solar here trying to get his third hatchery up and running. Zerx essentially will just try to make as many drones as possible right now. With some leftover minerals, they go for some additional queens. And obviously, as little gas mining here as possible. You don't really want to get any gas going until you really need to.
Yeah, definitely going to be the case. And the Reaper is just going to move around, get some additional scouting information. We do have the Banshee, and you know what? I love when we do have stuff like this, where it isn't going to be Hyperflight Rotor Banshee unless he does something very, very strange and starts it up after Cloak or something. But there's no second starport or anything. And this is just these little things where in a best of 3, you can kind of make your opponent think, okay, there's a Banshee. I don't think you're doing Hyperflight Rotors, but like, I got to respect the potential that you're doing something a little bit funky again. It is going to be a much, much more normal opening here for Ryung, though.
So these two are in a group together with Future and DNS.
Yeah.
So I do feel like there's a very good chance that we'll see both of these players, move on in the later stage of the tournament.
No, that's just shots fired at my boy Future.
I mean, I'm not saying that Future is gonna have an easy time in his group. That's what I'm saying.
I think most people will agree with you. I think Future will agree with you there that, like, yeah, the Ryung and Solar are probably the 2 favorite players in here. But I do think Future has, I think he is a player that is volatile enough in terms of being able to exceed expectations with his performance, that he is someone you do have to be a little bit careful of. So I could see him doing very well, especially versus Ryung. I could see him pulling off an upset.
Yeah, so Future has played against Solar, lost 2-0, but he won 2-1 over DNS.
Oh, nice. Yeah. DNS, having a little bit rougher run in that second group stage, but that's where the knockout bracket comes in, Loco.
Alrighty, so Solar this time around not going for the Roach style. Instead, he is transitioning towards the good old faithful Ling Bane army instead, opting to go for that Baneling speed here pretty quickly. I'm assuming he's going to start it up here as soon as the lair finishes, and then eventually go into the double upgrades as well. Whereas in the meantime, Ryung is building up a much more standard macro game. He's got to try and do that multi-pronged harass. Maybe these Banshees can get something done.
Yeah, they already actually killed off the drone that was heading over to our 4th base location. So already slowing down things just a little bit here and there. But I really am a fan of how Ryung has been playing this out. Because you know what? I don't know if it's the right decision, Loco, but it's the decision as a fan and a viewer that I want to see. I want to see how Ryung does in just kind of the standard sort of style game. And he's getting up his 1-1 upgrades. He's getting up stim. He's going for like this good old, very old and faithful Banshee Hellion opening. And he's going to be up against like a Ling Bane style. Like this is what TVZ was made to be.
Yep. This is the type of game that we've seen many times before, and oftentimes the player with the better mechanics ends up being the winner, right? The faster player, the player that can keep track of all of the different bits of harassment. Now, he does still have all of those Hellions alive, not really diving too deep with them in a mineral land just yet, but in the meantime, the Hellions are forcing the Queens to stay a little bit closer to the front. The Zergling's actually running in to help against the Banshees. Not a whole lot they can do, but good couple drone kills.
Yeah, it's obviously going to be nice when you're able to even just get a free extra couple of pickoffs or something with the Banshees, even if it is like a few Lings that are just running straight in. But I really love that Ryung is being quite careful with his Hellions and everything, especially considering the last game. I know it was a very different type of build, but look at this. It's a perfect game so far from Ryung in terms of losing units. He hasn't lost any, and all of these Hellions are going to be very effective for exactly what he lost to last game, which was a counterattack. You having a handful of Hellions that can turn to Hellbats and just protect those mineral lines is going to be extremely effective. It's also going to be effective for this kind of big push-in where 1-1 is going to be finishing up, combat shields is getting closer and closer to finishing. Like, this is a nice timing window for Ryung to hit with.
And the armory, too. So he's going to be able to actually now keep those Hellions that you pointed out, and he's going to be able to morph them into Hellbats as well. Zerglings are trying to set up a wraparound around the north, but good luck trying to kill that siege tank with Zerglings.
Oh, God. Yeah, that is a abusive position. That is a brutal position, man.
You know what? This is an excellent situation right now for Ryung. Is Solar going to be able to break through this? He's going to have 1-1 finishing up in about 10 seconds. He definitely wants to finish those upgrades before committing here. But those, now there's a second siege tank as well. Those Hellbats are going to be super powerful.
Yeah, I don't see any reinforcements or anything coming for Ryung, so this is going to be more or less it. And Solar's just going to go for it. Lings come streaming on forward. The Hellbat's going to try and absorb as much as they can, but look at that. There's just way too much Zerg, and Ryung is going to be forced to evacuate. He does trade off a little bit, but Ryung is going to be not quite as happy that he just got cleaned up so easily.
Yeah, I don't think that was the end of the world. Those Solar actually engaging right before +1 ground carapace, which is not ideal. And yeah, resources lost-wise, I actually think it's totally fine, since Ryung also went for a 4th command center in the meantime. Gonna be able to morph that into a planetary. This is the Ryung we want to see.
Good old macro Ryung. He's gonna be able to force the cancel over there on that hatchery as well. Nicely done. He's all over the place. I love the Terran players that don't just do the push-in, and then they're kind of like, okay, I need to regroup and do another push-in in a little bit. It's like the Terran player that gets in your face and just never stops being in your face. You'll always find the opportunity. Look, we already found another siege up position. Beautiful. This is going to be annoying for Solar to try and dislodge.
Yeah, you brought up the Hellions from earlier. The Zergling, the creep spread on the left side of the map got denied really hard. I think we've seen like a dozen creep tumors going down over there. And Solar actually is not in that comfortable of a spot over here. This is very much so now becoming a tempo advantage for Ryung. Those Banshees still picking up drone after drone. You know what? These two have achieved more than the 12 Banshees from the previous game.
Yeah, it turns out empirically that based on the 2-game sample size, Hyperflight Rotors has not been working out.
Fact. That's how that works. Well, we shouldn't have said anything.
Yeah, they do eventually go down. But you know what? They drew all of the Queens over to the left-hand side and stuff, so gave Ryung a bit of a chance to evacuate out with some other stuff. And also, they got into the main base, and as our wonderful observer was pointing out, we see that Hive has started up, and Ryung sees that as well.
Alrighty, so I think that Solar at this point is aiming to transition towards the good old Lurker, right? Lurkers are really good at, well, making this tempo advantage that Ryung has go away. But so far, I really like the positioning for Ryung. He needs to be careful, he doesn't overextend, and, well, that once again is a very well-protected siege tank.
Ooh, nice pick off there. Gets all those Marines picked off right before 2-2 actually finishes up there, as that is going to even up the upgrades. And with 3-3 only just now starting here for Ryung, you're going to see Solar keeping up with those upgrades pretty well. A lot of Banelings almost get caught, but actually they turn around and decide to catch the reinforcements over here. Not quite the trades that I think he was looking for, but gets a tank.
I actually really like Ryung's target firing on the Banelings with the siege tank. Like, he's been constantly retargeting. Now, At this point, though, he's very split up, and I do think he's going to get cleaned up if he's not careful right here on the left side of the map. This is now becoming a little bit dangerous, because the vast majority of Ryung's army is not here.
Yeah, it definitely is going to be dangerous as Solar swarms over to the left-hand side, but I mean, he just lost a lot of Banelings. He's waiting for the reinforcements to come in for the right-hand side. The Marines protected by those 2 linchpin siege tanks in the top left behind those destructible rocks. This is so annoying for Solar to dislodge, and in fact, he's going to have to give up the base. This is a big win for Ryung.
Banelings, though, in the natural cleaned up those medevac drops, and now Banelings are connecting over here at the front as well. I love the picture-in-picture, by the way. That's excellent, but that was certainly not the control we wanted to see right there from Ryung, as Solar now finally cleans it up. Sure, he took a lot of damage there. He lost the hatchery and all that, but I think that's the cleanup that you're aiming for right there as Zerg. I mean, does he have a lurker then, actually?
I think you mentioned that he was going for a lurker then. I'm not sure if
it seemed like he was headed in that direction anyways. Okay, now he starts it up. I actually think he forgot about it.
Well, I mean, that is another bit of damage, the indirect damage that you can do with just the constant pressure. Ryung has not really given Solar more than 10 or 15 seconds at a time without continuing in with yet another attack, and he gets another cancel on this hatchery. I want to note, that cancel on that hatchery is actually starting to become really painful after having just lost another one of your bases. The mining for Solar is pretty paltry right now.
That creep spread denial has been fantastic in this game. Like Ryung has, look at the creep spread right now. If you compare this to where we see Zerg players all the time, it's not uncommon to see the Zergs knocking on the third base of Terran at this point with their creep. Anyways, Vipers are now available as well, so parasitic bombs and all that are pretty dangerous against those medevacs. We do already have a Ghost Academy researching the cloaking field right now, as you can see in the first-person view of both of these players.
Yeah, you can see both these players finally taking a moment to be a bit defensive. Even Ryung kind of looking back at home before he finally starts firing off some more of those drops, but one of them gets cleaned up. The Hydras and the Vipers have had enough of that, so these drops are going to have a much harder time getting quite as much damage done if Solar's able to catch things. But this goes back to the creep spread you were talking about, where if you have the creep spread, you can see those drops coming in a little bit in advance. You can get your Hydras and whatnot in position. He's been having a hard time with that because the creep spread just isn't there anymore.
Yeah, securing those bases in the bottom right here, and then at like the 9 o'clock position for Solar is really tricky without creep in the right place. But what he does have right now is creep growing, or creep going rather, through the center.
I mean, it does grow,
It does grow through the center too, I suppose.
Yeah. He's definitely going to have an easier time that he has like a fair number of Hydras and Lings and Banelings to try and get some of the creep going through that center section. But that's assuming Ryung isn't going to be going for any kind of push-outs. And he's not doing that right now. But Solar's the one that's now encroaching in onto Ryung's territory for one of those forward bases, and that is going to be a very difficult location for, I think, Solar to break right now.
Okay, so we're setting ourselves up for a nice little macro game here, Fred.
Yeah, I think we're getting into like a pretty solid one at this point, with both these players getting to the late game tech. I mean, like you said, we have ghosts and lurkers and everything coming on out. But I really, really do feel like Ryung still has a good amount of this like earlier game momentum, where if he's able to defend well as he's been offending, I think he's going to be doing great.
Okay, let's see if this planetary stays alive. If he can pull that off, that would be amazing. And you know what? I don't think there's enough Banelings.
Yeah, and he
keeps it alive.
Yeah, he pulled off to repair with a bunch of the SCVs, and it was just Lings for the most part on the planetary fortress. Like you said, the Banelings went off onto the left-hand side to go after the Marines, and he just didn't have the damage, so now he ends up sacrificing his army. Ryung says, okay, well, I think I actually defended that pretty well. I feel like I can attack in before you make any Banelings. The Banelings are still morphing. The hatchery is already taking damage, and I don't actually think that's... Unless Solar can punish this on the retreat, I don't actually think he's going to be able to save this.
He's going to try exactly that, but the siege tanks did not quite unsiege yet. Then again, the ghosts are not really particularly well protected. Those medevacs really far out, but is there any detection? There's no Overlord speed. He starts it up right now.
Oh, I love the pickup into the medevac, so he saves a handful more of those ghosts. He gets it back to the planetary, and there are quite a few Banelings and Hydras over here. He might be able to contest this. Are there enough reinforcements coming forward for Ryung? The Banelings stopping the SCVs from repairing, and they do manage to pick off that planetary. That is an important and very needed win there for Solar.
Okay. So, this game going back and forth right now. Keep in mind, though, that we are now well into the territory of Terrans making a gajillion command centers. I see a lot of big squares on the minimap here, Dragon. He can pick and choose whatever one he wants to move over to the right.
How do Terran players decide where to throw in the command center? Because sometimes I just feel like...
Wherever you're looking.
It's just like, yeah, it's just, you know what? Wherever I am right now, the SCVs are like making their marathon run from the main base over to the center of the map to make those command centers, but... Yeah, man, he is definitely getting set up with that. Would love to have him save the sensor tower, but not going to be able to do so. Solar, man, adrenal gland lings, man, they kill stuff fast.
Okay, so now lurkers are really coming out in big numbers. Lurkers, Vipers, Zerglings, Hydras, it's a scary unit composition. But theoretically speaking, Ryung should have the answer here. A lot of it, though, comes down to that micro and that multitasking, right? And it's really difficult.
I think he saved a lot of his ghosts from those previous engagements as well. So those are going to be very much coming in handy. And like you said, even things like Liberators and stuff going to be coming forward. The Vipers can help deal with that with things like these Ducks on both the Sea Shanks and also the Liberators. But I still kind of like the situation a bit for Ryung. If he can get in position and help deal with these lurkers, because I think being offensive with lurkers, it does take a lot of time and patience to find the openings.
Yeah, so at this point we are definitely at the late game, right? So Ryung playing a really stellar and solid early game. Mid game definitely looking good as well. What about the late game though, right? And this is where the game is obviously very different. The pacing changes quite a bit, and so far I actually like what Ryung is doing, just slowing down the game quite a while, right? Like he's been dropping all over the map and he's been trying to get that momentum going, but right now he's forced to sit back and it seems like he's scaling down nicely.
Yeah, and I think exactly to your point, the last time we saw Ryung attack was even just a few minutes ago, and the only time he was attacked in the last, like, I want to say almost 4 or 5 minutes now, was when he defended effectively enough that he felt like he could go for the counterattack. And that's when he killed that bottom right-hand base, right? Outside of that, he hasn't really actually been offensive. Well, I guess this kind of counts as an offense since he tries to kill a hatchery that's on his side of the map. Yeah. A little unfortunate there. Ooh, this is a very aggressive run-in over here. These lurkers going to be very vulnerable to these ghosts. They're going to try and get out of dodge. He doesn't manage to kill off the planetary fortress either, but, you know, saves the lurkers. That's important.
Okay, so this is where Terra needs to split up their units. So far, Ryung has held on to the left side of the map, but the right side is not going to be as solid. 22 SCVs ended up going down on top of the planetary.
That's big.
But he did kill a hatchery.
Yeah, I really love these 1-2 punches from Solar on the left and the right-hand side. Splitting up your army is really, really difficult when you have so many siege tanks and liberators, and they just aren't the most mobile units. Even though you're not moving that great of a distance between the left and right-hand side, it is still really tough to make sure that they're always in position, especially when things like those sensor towers and everything died. You know, Loco, I don't have my glasses. Do we have any sensor towers on the map right now?
There is one sensor tower over at the third base, yes.
Yeah, sorry. I legitimately don't have my glasses, and it's also a snow map, so the white lines are very difficult for me to see right now.
It's okay. If you need any other help, let me know. I'll use my eyeballs to look at the screen.
I'm becoming an old man. I turned 32 or 33 this year. I don't even remember.
You don't remember?
I actually don't remember.
What year was I born again? Was it 90?
It was 32. It was 32. Okay, thank God. Oh, man, if it was 33, I'd be truly losing my mind.
Many people stop counting at some point, but you just forget.
Then
that's even better.
Yeah, man. If I was 33 at this point, I would just be like raging on the Brood War ladder. All right, we got finally the Ghost. Oh, wow, the Enhanced Shockwaves upgrade finally coming on. I guess it's not quite as common to go for the EMPs as much in this matchup, except for really just the Vipers and stuff, since we haven't really seen any Infestors, but speak of the devil, we do see some Infestors starting on up.
Solar, for like the third time right now, trying to take the base in the top left. This is supposed to be one of the Terran bases. And that's where the game becomes really tricky, though, because Solar is already a couple bases up on his opponent.
I think it's bait, man. Okay, here's the thing. I think it is great if you can actually start mining from that. But I think it's bait because every single time he does it, you see that Ryung commits a bunch of his army up to the top left, and then immediately Solar hits the bottom right, and he ends up almost always killing that bottom right-hand base every time Ryung commits up to the top left.
Yeah, you know what? If he doesn't take the bait, you get to mine it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not so bad after all.
It's bait, but you actually get a benefit from it.
All right, so we do have that mech transition right now coming up for Ryung. So Ryung apparently happy with the ghost count. Usually this is the point where the Marines and the Marauders are no longer being remade. Instead, he's going to be going for that ultimate Terran Death Ball. The problem is, though, Solar has a good bank already, and it's not like Solar is really slowing down here either, right? He's got a good amount of resources. He can make whatever he likes, and wouldn't be surprised if we're going to be seeing a tech transition right here from the Zerg as well in a moment.
Yeah, wouldn't be the worst call. Marines are going to be able to deny mining over here.
There it is, man. The 1-2 punch you were talking about.
Exactly, yeah. He says, all right, you sent a few units over there. My lurkers saw that there weren't that many units over here. Oh, look at that. Banelings connecting on a bunch of these SCVs, 20 of them going down. The Banelings continue to commit. They decide to back off and not going after the sensor tower, and they are just going to ensure that this base is fully cleaned up and retreat back to the safety of the Hydras, which are going to protect them against the Liberators. I do wonder if Solar needs to stick around over here, but I guess he's getting a free couple of pickoffs here, and he has the economy to afford it.
Yeah, exactly. Like, he's creating a soft contain on his opponent right now, right? Like, Ryung is running out of money. Like, his third base is running dry. I'm assuming the fourth base is also running dry. And where exactly is Terran going to expend right now? So, yeah, that's the only money he's got. That's not a great amount at all. So.
Yeah, it's very tough. And these infestors could also they could be the things that seal the deal here for Solar, because he gets one big fungal growth off or something off of this economy that he has off of all of the Banelings he's making, that could just actually end the game.
Yeah, now the creep spread is well caught up as well. It's going to be tricky here for Solar to close out the game, but he is ready to do so right now as he once again moves forward with a large army. Yeah, Blinding Cloud is nice, Fungal Growth and all that is nice too, but Ryung has got enough stuff to push it back.
Yeah, I like that.
He doesn't have Neural. I think he tried going for a Neural, but he couldn't.
Oh, really? Oh, man. Okay, well, that's a little unfortunate, but I like that Ryung had the attention to detail there to scan and actually target fire down some of those infestors, but this is still becoming kind of a dire situation. I think the big game plan here for Ryung is not necessarily about economy anymore. I think it's about maxing out, taking one really good fight on the defensive, and then getting a kind of counter swing going where he's able to start knocking out some of these bases of Solar before he's able to actually remax with that bank he's been building up.
Yeah, at this point, Solar is just being annoying, right? He's almost shouting at his opponent right now, get out of my game. You can keep sitting here if you want to, and maybe there's a chance that Ryung is going to be able to take another good fight. The problem, though, with those big, heavy mech units is that Blinding Cloud just shuts them down. Still a good amount of ghosts remain, a good amount of siege tanks, too.
It's cost efficient. This is the thing. It's cost efficient for Ryung, and Solar knows that. Ryung knows that. But the difference is Solar still is denying the fresh bases. Unless Solar takes a bad enough engagement that Ryung can comfortably secure a new base, Ryung cannot bring himself back in this game. That is the obstacle that Ryung has to overcome. He has to be able to secure a new base or drain Solar's bank. And so far, I mean, he's done an okay job of draining a bit of Solar's bank, but that's because Solar is getting ready for another big attack. And that, I think, is going to be the key moment.
Yeah, Ryung is trying to... He's continuously trying to both secure the right side of the map as well as the left side, right? And that is what Solar is abusing here with his relatively low-tech army. It just isn't really working. He's got a command center floating. Well, he had a command center floating in the top left, but he's now forced to move it back. Okay, here's a Neural Parasite. EMP on the other ghosts, and now the rest of the Zerg army can flood in if they want to. He doesn't have scan. He needs to land that command center to scan. There you go.
Oh, that's very, very painful. I mean, the power of
There's
lurkers...
another infestor, by the way.
God, that's going to be annoying. The power of lurkers definitely got, raised up another level with all of the ghosts being EMP'd and not having energy. But I think this is still going to be kind of an awkward and tough spot for him to poke into. I think he can shut down the base, but moving further than that is still going to be tough.
We are at the point, though, where Solar doesn't have that much money anymore. As a matter of fact, he spent the bank that he once upon a time had. So I actually like Ryung taking it really slow here. There is a chance Solar is going to commit. I mean, I do still think that Solar is clearly favored, but if we see one more of those engagements going poorly right here for Solar, and we'll find out right now, I think the situation for Ryung gets a whole lot better.
I think this is good enough for Solar, though. The Blinding Clouds come down on top of those siege tanks. This is a cost-effective trade here for Solar compared to all the previous ones. He breaks on through. He takes out the couple of siege tanks there, and we see it. 2-0. Solar is able to take this series and advance forward.
Yeah, excellent games right there from Solar. Game number 1, he held that really smoothly. Didn't even have any problems at all against the double Starport Banshee opener. Game number 2, just a slightly better macro game overall, right? It's not really like one thing that really set him apart. It's just a couple of those small moves that add up over the course of a game. And turns out Wardy's prediction was not entirely correct.
It wasn't, but I do want to give some credit to Ryung because I don't think that second, obviously the first game was a little bit of a wash, but the second game, I do think he had some really good moments there. We were talking about this before. He was doing a great job of cleaning up that creep spread. He was doing a great job with the constant aggression. He had a lot of good things going his way there.
He was ahead in the early game, I think.
Exactly. But I think it is also a testament again to what makes Solar so scary is that he can come back despite all those things not really going his way as the game kept going further and further on.
Yeah, I think in the early game, Solar was a little bit